Payment terms are used on customer and vendor invoices to calculate due dates, early payment discount dates, and early payment discounts. To create a new term, you would go to Setup, Names, and Payment Terms. To create a new term, we could click New, and it'll ask you for an abbreviation, which is optional, and then we will also put in a name for that. Okay, so the term that I'm creating is a term where the invoice will be due 30 days from the invoice date, and we're going to offer them a 1% discount if they pay within 10 days. There's two different types of terms that can be calculated. One is where there's a number of days until the due date, and that's the one that I have. It's going to be 30 days until the due date. The other is that you can set up a term where it's going to be due on a specific day of the month. And then you can put the day of the month into the box. Now, when you choose this type of term, you have two other options you can select. The first is that if that due date gets too close to the end of the month, or if that invoice date gets too close to the due date, you could push it off until the next month. So for example, if I put a 2 in here and I have an invoice that's on the 29th of the month, I'm going to push it off to the next month's due date. I'm going to set that back to 0. And then you also can select which months you're going to create those due dates in. So if you have something that's just due once a quarter, you could remove the check marks from all of the months except for the quarters in which that due date will be calculated. I'm going to set this back to number of days because the one I was creating was 30 days from the invoice date. Now, if you have an early payment discount, you can describe that below. If you don't, then you could leave this at 0. I said I was going to have a 1% discount if the invoice was paid within 10 days. And so that's what I'm going to select there, 1% if they pay within 10 days. The other option you have on the early payment discounts is to say that they're due, that early payment or that discount expires on a particular day of the month. Usually these go together. If your due date is calculated as a number of days after the invoice date, then you're probably going to calculate your discount as a number of days before the discount expires. If your invoice due date was a particular day of the month, then you're probably going to set up your discount as a particular day of the month as well. I'm going to click Save on that. Now, just a few things about this screen, quick things that you can do. If you want to edit one of these terms, you can just double click on it to edit it, or you could highlight it and click the Edit button. You can delete a term, but only if it hasn't been used in a transaction. And then you also have an option to copy one. So let's say, I'm going to go back to that. Let's say that I want one that's similar to the one that I just created, except I want it to be 0.5%. I can highlight this one, click copy, and then I can change it to 0.5/10, 0.5/10 net 30. So everything remains the same except for the name and then the discount percentage. I'm going to make that be 0.5% and then click Save. So it's a quick way to create a new term if it's similar to an existing term. I can also combine terms. Let's say I've been using this 0.5% one, but I want to change everything over to the 1%. I can highlight the 0.5%, click Combine, and then highlight the 1% discount term and combine it with that. And then any transactions, any defaults on any customer record that was using that previous term would now be set to this new term. Just a couple of other items on here. I just want to point out a couple of terms that we have set up. I have one set up as the end of the month. And what you're going to notice here is that I made the end of the month be the 31st. But obviously some months don't have 31 days in it. The system is smart enough to calculate that due date to be the 30th of the month if it only has 30 days, or the 28th of the month if it only has 28 days. And then I also wanted to point out the quarterly due date term that I set up. I just want you to see that I made it quarterly, and I said that The due dates were going to be the end of March, the end of June, the end of September, and the end of December. Now, the next step in maintaining or managing these payment terms is to assign that payment term to a vendor or customer so that it would default each time you created a new invoice for that customer or for that vendor. So to do that, we can either go to Setup in Customers or Setup in Vendors, or we could go to Setup in Names, which happens to allow for both customers and vendors. So I'm going to go there. And I'm going to go down to one of my vendors, Summit Utility Company or Summit Water Company, either one, and I'm going to edit the vendor. And this one is just a vendor. So next to the vendor where it's checked as a vendor, there's a detail button. When I click on that detail button, you're going to see that there is a place for us to assign a default payment term. Now, if it was a customer as well, the customer box would be checked, and then you would go to the detail button next to the customer to assign a default payment term for when they are a customer. Those could obviously be different. So I'm going to save that vendor. Now, I want to show you how this works when we're entering in a transaction. So I'm going to go to a vendor invoice, but entering in a customer invoice would be similar. I'm going to select the vendor invoice, and then I'm going to select one of my vendors. I'm going to choose Summit Utility Company or Summit Water Company. Actually, I will choose Summit Water Company. When I select that vendor, what's going to happen is it's going to calculate some due dates because it's defaulting their terms in. So you see their term has been defaulted in. So it calculated, not only did it calculate the due date, but it also calculated the discount date. If I have it default a term, but I want to select a different term, I can do that. I can just select the term in the box, and then it changes it to that term. Now, this particular term doesn't have a discount on it, so you'll notice that the discount date became the same date as the invoice date. Likewise, if there was no term at all assigned to that customer or vendor, this field would be blank, and I would be able to select which term I wanted by just clicking on the lookup and selecting the term that I want to use. And the situation is very similar, if not the same, for customer invoices. So now we have seen how to create a payment term, how to assign it as a default to our customers and vendors, and how to use those payment terms in a transaction. You can also see payment terms and discounts on several of your reports.